The meeting now. It's the meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee for June 12th, 2020, called to order at 1:03 p.m. This is being recorded in conformity with the governor's directive about holding meetings online, that they be recorded and made available subsequently for viewers to see. Lois, do you want to ask who the call-ins are?
Yeah, I'm just seeing call-in user 2. Call-in user 3 has disappeared. So who's call-in user 2?
It may be a member of the public who doesn't want to identify themselves. They don't have to. If it is a voting member of the FAC, we need to know who it is. Okay. Let me find the agenda. And I'm going to put the agenda up. We have the minutes. 1 second. I'm going to go to screen sharing.
You're getting very good at this, David.
Yeah, well, this is my third meeting of the day, but don't speak too soon. Here's the minutes of the last meeting, which was sent to everybody as an attachment. There's 3 pages. Here's page 1. Is there any modifications to, because often we have a little bit of problem with, who was present and who was absent. Is there any modifications to that? If not, let's proceed to the other parts. Page 2. These are very exhaustive and quite comprehensive minutes. And I would draw your attention to the note here halfway down the page, College System Organization Chart. It is a nicely colored document. I believe that is something positive that we had to say. We can't be always considered to be naysayers.
Well, no, I think we had something good to say about the fact that there was a cashier at every college.
Yeah, I like that the best.
Hi, this is Barbara calling in.
Yes? Who is that, please?
That was Barbara.
Okay. That's call-in user number 4. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? If so, please say your name so that we can record that.
Fran Cohn, so moved.
Okay. I think that's all that's required. Are there any modifications to the minutes? If not, those in favor say aye. The voting members, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Let's go back to the agenda. Reports from chair, attachment, and vice chair. We thought we would add this item. You received as an email attachment a document that I wrote, which is kind of my report as the chair, which I would ask that we simply receive. And it was in response to a question I was asked, what exactly are your complaints? And how did all this come about? So I tried in 10 pages or less to summarize what I thought were the essential points. If there are any things that are incorrect in this, do let me know. I'm going to add one thing. I had a chart from an early finance committee report, and I'm not sure if I can get this bigger, but you can see over here, this was from 2019, the CCC System Office, $36 million, $36.9 million. It's almost $37 million. And I had been a little confused as to what that is, but this has all been clarified at the Finance Committee meeting, which I attended, and I believe, Kalina, you were also a call-in. for the Finance Committee this week. And in fact, that is the CCC is Connecticut Community College. That is distinct from CSCC, which is the Connecticut State Community College, i.e. the non-existent one community college for which 6 interim executive members were named at the last Board of Regents meeting. And I can give you now, I can update that with the following. If you look here at the center of the page, from the report, it's actually, in a certain sense, worse than I thought. In 2020, this is just the budget that goes for the system office, and that would be for all of their staff, and there's 148 by my latest count, plus other expenses that they have, and that may include also consulting contracts and so forth. In 2020, the community college portion was $35.25 million. And that is charged, that doesn't appear in the budget of the legislature or the governor. That is charged to the amounts which are apportioned to the community colleges. So all the community colleges, that their budget, their operating budget is reduced by $35.25 million in 2020 to pay for the system office. Then you have the CSU portion of the system office. That's for the 4 universities for services which they supposedly receive, and for individuals who are assigned to CSU or who part of whose time. I'm not quite clear as to how they do this from an accounting point of view. That was $8.09 million. So that meant a total of $43.34 million. This is all from the latest agenda of the Finance Committee. Was spent in 2020, or will be spent once part of it obviously is a projection for the next few months. For the budget for 2021, this part of the budget, the communication colleges portion of the budget, has been divided into 2 parts. 92% of the budget now goes for the CSCC portion. That is the Connecticut State Community College. That is the one college, the non-existent one college. They are apportioned a budget of $35.75 million, which, as you see, is greater than the total budget for this year for all of the community college expenses, and the sort of rump part left for, and not clearly defined how this works, for community colleges as well is another $2.85 million. The CSU portion of the system office budget is pretty well constant. It's raised another $330,000 to $8.42 million. That makes for the total projected budget just for the system office, that is to say Woodland Street, at $47.02 million. Right? And that is an increase of $3.86 million, almost exclusively going into the CSCC portion of the system office budget, or 8.9%. That's at a time when budgets for the universities and community colleges are being reduced by an average of something like 7 to 8%. So that's something that I want to add to the report that I'm making, and I will include this in the document and update it to that effect. Other things in the document, and Francis, I know you've also been working on this. I spent 2 days, not all of the days, but certainly a few hours each day going through the 15-page, nicely colored, in Lois's words, organization chart, trying to figure out how many people are involved in this. And I made an arbitrary sort of line for this calculation to include presidents, vice presidents, associate vice presidents, chief officers, executive officers, directors, associate directors, deans, and associate deans. That struck me as, I don't know how exactly these people are apportioned otherwise. And so I included in this report, as you can see it here, my estimation of the number of positions at the more or less executive level. So this does not include a whole bunch of supervisors, advisors, and other people, and there's certainly another 30 or 40 of those, right? It does include the regional presidents and deans and associate deans at the regional level. So there is some regional material in here. It's a rather complicated 15 pages, and perhaps some of you have done better than me, but I calculated as follows, that there are 45 people reporting to the, where am I? Yes, sorry. To the vice president, provost, or CAO, that's Dr. Rook, or his immediate subordinates. So these are direct or one-step removed reports, 45. Then there was a second vice president, the vice president for enrollment management and student affairs, for which there are a whole bunch of associate vice presidents. Remember, there are 11 associate vice presidents in this scheme. And I had a calculation of 30 reporting to that person. There's another vice president who is the vice president for management and, I'm sorry, for finance and administration. There are 5 reports, but it's not broken down any further. So it only appears that there are 2 vice presidents here, but there's a third one, which I've included higher up. And then there was, on pages 15, that rather bizarre chart of campus teams who report to the CEO, and I included the dean of faculty, associate deans, associate dean for campus operation. So that would be 3 at each of the 12 campuses or institutions. Plus I added 3 more for the largest, so I got a total of 39. And then college leadership reporting to the to the regional presidents, regional directors for advising, enrollment service, financial aid. Anyways, all of these functions are duplicated and triplicated as you go through the charts. And so I came up with that total of 181. So, Francis, I don't know if you have numbers which are different than mine.
Yeah, and you know, I went through this 3 or 4 times and I came up with 3 or 4 different figures because I'm not sure if I'm duplicating some of them, but that your figure may be low. It may be well over 200 positions.
Yeah.
It came up.
You and I should compare notes because I had the same problem. I did come at one point to 220, and that's some of the pages are duplicated. So pages, for those who are interested in this, and I'm not going to spend more time on it, most of pages 2 and all of page 8 are duplications. They are sort of like an intermediate chart, which is then expanded, including all of those positions later on. So we have all that. The obvious focus of this was, the diminished role of faculty, especially in the organization charts. It's just amorphous, one full-time faculty, lab technicians, and adjunct faculty. They don't even bother to calculate the number that there are currently at the community colleges. I mean, this is the lowest category, right? These are the grunts. These are the guys you send over the trenches, I guess. And also the elimination of department chairs. And I tried to summarize as best I can what you've expressed to me. Community college faculty feel a greater sense of attachment to their local college, sense of community, and heightened concern that the community is being taken out of the community colleges. Community college faculty have developed links with university faculty who both sympathize with their critiques and oppose consolidation of university back office. And third, community college and university senates, almost all, have passed motions of opposition or non-confidence to students first. These are unlikely to go away. Though mobilization has been reduced during the pandemic, a movement of criticism now exists. And so I tried then to just formulate very briefly what I thought might be some conclusions and prospects. I mean, these are not my point of view. Focusing on the fact that public higher education is bottom up and not top down. And trying to analyze a little bit, as I understand it, shared governance, because it seems to me that when it comes to curriculum, that is our element of control. That is the faculty's element of control. And then it only needs the final approval by the administration. Budget is really their area of control, but they need to consult with us. And any reorganization, that's got to be 50-50, not, 99-1 as it currently is. Secondly, at the top of this little presentation, I made a point which may be peculiar to me, but I don't like calling CSUS a system. A system is a whole, the parts of which are essential to its functioning. and to the outcomes that are going to be produced by that system. And the Board of Regents and Woodland Street, the system office, are not essential to our functioning. Each institution, whether a university or a community college, is a system in its own right. And what we have is an attempt to desystemize, if I can put it that way, the community colleges and create a system with this ridiculous organization chart at the level of the system office. And so I just use the term federation. I mean, we should be a federation. There is no overreaching system. And the points that I make are that we have to respect two things. One are the distinct missions of the various types of institutions. That's in the state law creating the Board of Regents, right? And they have not respected that. The distinction of missions between the community colleges, Charter Oak, and the four state universities. Secondly, autonomy and integrity of the individual institutions. I think that's an important point, which of course they are totally rejecting in terms of the students first. And then the third conclusion here was, again, on the federated model. I think we're going to have to look at the question of shared services and regional coordination. There's nothing wrong with that in principle, but it has to be based on mutual consent, not command and control from the top. And I also think that we need to re-examine the current merger of the community colleges, Charter Oak, and the state universities under a single board. That board devotes almost entirely its time to the consolidation to students first. And we need to look at its cost, both financial and academic, relative to its benefits, which seem to me largely limited to TAPS and some shared services. Fourthly, and I'll conclude very quickly, they need to stop the blame game, and to some extent, so do we. We personalize things. It's us versus Ojakian. It's really a question of their model versus alternatives that we need to propose. And I think that that's probably the way in which I'd like to look at it. Two things that need to be done, it seems to me, in the immediate, are the planned merger of the community colleges into the accreditation of one as a transitional move to the one community college. That has to stop. And secondly, the implementation of the bloated organization chart, any further hirings or appointments based on it. And then I suggest some things which I've suggested before. If they really want to make savings, and that was how this whole thing started off back in 2011, there are plenty of ways to save in the millions to tens of millions of dollars, and I'd say more in the tens. Reduce the size of the system office by a third. That's a saving already of 15 million. Use open source software. That's savings of tens of million. I'm on a working group for online programs, which I was nominated to by the president of my university. I'm not very happy with it, and I'll be writing a minority report rejecting its conclusions. But the point is, they've got 4 people from Blackboard who have been working for 6 months on a consulting contract. I'm asking for how much that is, but I bet you it's a lot of money. Open source software, reduction of intramural sports, and also revenue raising by individual foundations assisted by a statewide campaign. Well, that was my comments in my report. I've circulated this to a number of people, and I just ask that it be received by the advisory committee. If you have comments or critical comments on it, let me know now or send me an email.
Well done. Very thorough.
Yeah, I agree with Fran, David. I think you did a phenomenal job. Very, very clear, very detailed, but also, well reasoned, and lots of evidence. Very, very well done.
Okay.
I agree. I think it's fantastic.
So do I.
So feel free to use it, circulate it as you please. I will send you an additional one with the figures for the expansion of the budget of the system office. So I'll send that out later today. I just came across all these details on Wednesday. Okay, Colina, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. And yeah, thank you. That is so necessary. And I think the real tragedy is that we don't have the opportunity to have that in-depth conversation, looking at the numbers and hashing it out with anyone. Right? So yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to just kind of let you all know what I've been doing kind of in this role. Not a full report, but I think you all know that I did talk to Linda Lambeck about the NECHI report, and she wrote that article. And I did email you all, sort of apologizing for speculating about why people may have abstained when there actually wasn't anything from those who did abstain. So I hope those of you who wanted to say something might have reached out. I have been in contact with Scott Asdale, who's the president of Connecticut NAACP. And that was actually before all of what's going on right now. That was simply because, this was one of the things that Barbara had actually suggested that we do back at the beginning of the year, just sort of keep in contact with community partners, especially since the NAACP has, well, Scott Esdale personally has weighed in sort of in favor of consolidation, and it's important that he hears our voice also. So I'm going to stay in contact with him. He's willing to chat with us, especially now that things are going on at our next meeting, if that is appropriate. We'll see if there's anything productive that can come of that. But I think it's important for us to kind of hear what folks are saying, especially in terms of what's going on in terms of race. I know we have a huge CJ program. There might be people who want to have a discussion. So that's out there, and we'll see if we can make that productive. I have been in touch with Ben Barnes. I think I emailed him on May 26th, and my main concern was this assumption that guided pathways that cost 25 million a year would actually pay for itself. And every report I've gone back for the past year, there are no reports that actually substantiate that claim, but it is claimed as a conservative estimate, right? A conservative projection. And it didn't quite make sense. Or, there are certain places where there are documents that are cited that are supposed to support that assumption or projection. And I didn't see anything in those documents that, in fact, supported that projection. So I did ask him to sort of supplement that, and he wasn't able to get back to me. There was a bunch of month stuff, and he got back to me about 2 hours ago. So I thought about forwarding it to you all, but it's really not, I don't think it's sufficient. So instead of forwarding you incomplete information, I'll try to get something more and then give you something more complete when I do get it. Because I'm very concerned about that, because we know what's going to happen if we don't meet those projections, right? The Guided Pathways is projected to pay for itself in credit attempts, right? And if we're not getting those credit attempts, we might end up passing students through our gateway courses so that they'd make those credit attempts only to fail out a little bit further on with a little bit more money lost on their part, right? So we don't want to do that. I will say that what he has forwarded me still doesn't really get to the calculations, and a few things that have jumped out at me so far. So there's this return on investment sort of calculation thing that Rob Johnston has put out. And that's from the sort of Guided Pathways, Jobs for the Future, and I forget what it stands for, NCII. What does it stand for? National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. That partnership has put out sort of suggested ways of calculating how you can make sense of whether you can sustain the investment in guided pathways. And, I see the document, but I don't see the actual calculations. And it's described as a back of the envelope type of calculation. It's noted that we don't yet have information. This hasn't been done for long enough that we actually have data to work from, or at least sufficient data to work from. And the way that the cohorts were constructed so that we can project our own students from our own system is a bit, it's just kind of, in my opinion, a little ad hoc and relies entirely on assumptions about the efficacy of advisors encouraging students to continue or to clarify their path. So I don't know, it seems like a gamble, but I mean, I'm worried that, when we talk about the CCS 101 course, we'll talk about this some more, but it does seem that there is maybe not enough care taken when thinking about what our students actually need, and that translates into some real over optimism. At the same time, in the same way that Students First is being, all of the savings through attrition is being attributed to Students First, I suspect that our benefit due to to high unemployment is probably going to help us, right, accommodate anything that's lost in this transition. So whatever, but I think it's worth a look. Okay. I'm also going to contact Bill Gamble to help work that out. What else? Oh, and I just wanted to direct your attention to the PA 1240 report in, it's going to be in both the BOR agenda packet, and it was in the BOR ASA agenda packet for the last meeting. It's really interesting. It says good things about where we've gone. It gives a great history of the process, and it also emphasizes the need for a sort of bottom-up structure for that kind of success, and for differing interventions for each college. And if I don't, the teach out extension resolution is also in that packet if you're ever in need of looking for it. And I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Any comments? I mean, I do have one comment, which is when you were talking about the guided pathways savings, all of these are projections made on spreadsheets where we don't know what the formula is. And it doesn't, it's for senior administrators who spend their life with spreadsheets. The reality is not what we do in the classroom or what the students are learning. It's what's on the spreadsheet. And however that number got on the spreadsheet, that then becomes the facts that they base themselves on. And often these projections are really just that. They are projections, and they're not going to happen. We've gone through this at my university, where they came up with a way to cost out the strategic plan. And it turned out that 58% of the $84 million cost would be saved by, or would be offset by, increasing the student faculty ratio from 16:1 to 20:1. So we objected to that. And so they just changed it into some other terminology. But under the hood, it turned out that the $40 million savings was based on systematically eliminating each and every part-time faculty member who were teaching over 60% of the courses, the classes, over 10 years. And that was the formula, but they never would admit it. So these spreadsheets, I call it spreadsheet reasoning. It's like the opposite of critical thinking that we try to practice ourselves and teach our students.
I'll say this: it's an encouragement of calculations and numbers with absolutely like no grounding in reality, and it's very frustrating because the number makes it look like it amounts to something. But I'm particularly concerned, especially because it's the lack of knowledge of our students. There are these notes about limitations due to needing to work, needing to care for children, but the idea that advising could in any way remedy that, or even support could in any way remedy that so that they're capable of taking more courses. I don't know. I'm pretty concerned about that, and I think you kind of see a little bit of that blindness in the CCS 101 report.
This is Ron. I just have two items. One is Rob Johnstone. It's his job to sell guided pathways. So the fact that they're getting data from the salesman makes absolutely no sense. It's like what David said about his committee having Blackboard making recommendations to them. Blackboard has a vested interest in us pursuing Blackboard and more of it. Okay. Rob Johnstone has a huge interest in us pursuing guided pathways. It's how he makes his living. So that's a problem. That's a huge problem, regardless of the numbers. That's a huge problem. The other one is about the PA 1240 report. When I was associate dean, I oversaw the PA 1240 team, and I also oversaw institutional research. And so I put the two together, and we were one of the first colleges to produce a comprehensive 48-page data-driven PA 1240 report that I shared with the system office, and that's one of the places where they got their ideas for how to do a PA 1240 report. The problem with what they produced, okay, just like everything else that they produce, is that they don't break it down by college. And so the data is not useful. I've looked at the data that they have. And by the way, that data was produced by taking time from my IR office to be used to create that time that has prevented my IR research specialist from updating our PA 1240 report. Okay, so they produced a report that in essence took time away from our report and didn't allow our report to get done. Now, our report is what we have used to revise our math program, to our developmental math program, to revise our English program. Every time we get the data, every year, we look and see how the students are doing, and we see what adjustments we need to make to prereqs and other criteria in the course. From the system-wide PA 1240 report, you can't do that because it's aggregate information, and so it can't be used. And so it's really nice. It looks nice, okay, but it's not useful information. It gives you a status update, but it doesn't help you dig down and figure out what you need to do at your individual college. So it's really a huge waste of resources.
This is Jen Long. May I speak to that also?
Go ahead, please.
So thank you, Colina and Ron. I just wanted to give you guys a little history also about how that document was created. And one of the challenges I've been facing as my campus FAC rep and the PA 1240 rep from CSET is that the meetings often meet at the same time on the same day. So what happened was, as they were generating that report, I opted to go to the FAC meeting for the last two meetings. And then at the final hour, when the draft was sent to the whole group for feedback and electronic feedback, I kept writing and adding in all those pieces at the end of the document about how this has to be faculty driven and how we should go through groups like CSET to get these results. That wasn't even part of the first draft of it, which is kind of scary if you think about it. And I totally agree with everything that was said about how they're collecting data and how the lack of nuanced data collection is problematic. The other thing I wanted to note is that, so for example, in English, CSET is the body that has representatives from each campus. And we've done a lot of work in the last 15 to 20 years on outcomes and placement, et cetera. And just recently, a Students First Consolidation Committee was formed in English. And I've learned that there are only 25 members of that group because most of us aren't doing consolidation work. In the 25 members, 11 are adjuncts, 8 are from Manchester Community College, and there's no one representing Norwalk. And so that group's charge is to come up with new outcomes, new course descriptions, and even to create units for instruction. And we don't know what that means, but it's really a problem when we don't have representation from these longstanding statewide discipline groups. And so I'm not asking formally that we not hold FAC meetings at the same time as PA 1240, but if the people representing the groups can't be there, it can be challenging to have any kind of comments or feedback on it. So that was actually what happened with that draft, Colina. So I'm glad that you highlighted the importance of that, but it wasn't in the first draft. And in fact, I got it in maybe 3 hours before the final draft was due because it was so important, but it wasn't something they were even considering putting in. And thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I appreciated that part of the report, and that explains the sort of discrepancy, because the emphasis on college level sort of analysis was not reflected in the way they delivered the information, of course, right? So that makes more sense. Thanks, Jen.
Can I just say two words? I agree with everything everyone is saying. I don't think we're going to win this fight if we do it by spreadsheet. I really feel like the existential threat to higher education is just so big, it doesn't even fit on the spreadsheet. So I love the document that David put together. I love the letter I saw in the Connecticut Mirror this week. I just, when it gets down to spreadsheet numbers, none of that reflects what happens when the higher education, public higher education in Connecticut ceases to exist. I don't know. Have we considered a walkout or a strike? I really feel like it's existential. That's all.
I hear your frustration, Robin. I mean, I the week writing something on the sort of relationship between sort of racial disparities in access to education in the state and its connection. You know, what Lois has been saying all along is the actual solution to this, right? Which is fund us adequately, let us do what we need to do. And it doesn't come down to, you know, sensible economic decisions. It's a moral imperative at this point, given the situation in the state. Continually is, with whom do we have these conversations? Like, sound bites don't work. Even the length of articles for the Mirror don't work. This should have always been a real conversation within our community with all of us, and we just don't have the opportunity. And we have not heard, like, the governor has not responded to us at all, which is, and I am shocked by that. You know, when you have the experts in the system, you have an entire, you know, 17 institutions, and the folks who know how public education work are telling you this can't work. That is unfortunate. So I hear you. The question is, how do you make them listen?
Kalina, at our last faculty senate meeting, one of our faculty senators had an idea, and it may be too late, you know, but this is an election year. We have many candidates running for office. If we had a system-wide conversation and invited as many candidates as possible to it and let them hear, you know, what's the funny thing is, I keep on running into over and over and over again. I keep on running into elected representatives who don't know a thing about this. They claim to know nothing about what's going on in higher education in Connecticut. It's remarkable that you could be an elected representative in the state of Connecticut and not know what's going on in higher education. But they tell me that's the truth. I find it shocking. But you know, is it possible for us to do, you know, some virtual you know, summit with you know, as many candidates as possible? I think there's an opportunity here, particularly for our unions, to support candidates that you know, that actually listen to our concerns.
Yeah, Fran Cone. I think that's worth doing. Why not? And it might pay dividends. And back to Kalena's point, and there are people in the legislature who know this, and the governor should know this too. You know, the community colleges are one of the best economic investments in the history of the country. You know, this is the way ahead for so many of our students. It makes productive citizens. It adds to the tax base. These are people who stay here, work here, invest here, raise their families here. This should be easy. I mean, you know, there have been studies. Every dollar invested, there are multiple dollars that come back to the state. So this should really be an easy decision. But if the money's going to Woodland Street and not to the colleges, then you're going to get a different outcome, obviously.
But Fran, I think that that's the part that's missing. I think at the system office, they think, no, we're not getting rid of the community colleges. We're just doing it more efficiently. We're doing it better. But they are getting rid of the community colleges. They're getting rid of higher education. And every spreadsheet, that's the major assumption under all of the numbers, is that the institution continues to exist even when it's completely defunded and defanged. And it doesn't. So anyway, I'll shut up.
No, your point is well taken, because that is how they're advertising it. If what they were saying is we're going to close down some community colleges, shut the doors, then we have a different sort of argument. But they're saying, no, we're going to actually improve it. We're going to not only save money, but we're going to improve the 3-year graduation rate. We're going to reduce the achievement gap. We're going to do everything you want. We're going to wave this magic wand. It's called consolidation and alignment of courses and so forth. And all of a sudden, all of these good results, every good result that you want, will actually happen. And that's a very, I don't think that's a very good argument, but that's the argument that they make. And for people who, you know, for whom this is not a priority, I guess it has some effect. I do think we have to have an alternative, and we need to be, I think this summer we need to be working on how do we want to structure the community colleges? How do we want to structure the Board of Regents and the relationship between and among the community colleges, Charter Oak, and the 4 state universities? Because at this point we appear as the negative critics, the naysayers, right? You know, the report which I presented to you, I sent a version of that, an earlier version, just a day or so before I sent it to you. I sent it directly to the governor. And I said in my email that, you know, I disagree with his letter in support of Students First, and here are the reasons. And I'll be sending it to those few other people that I know. That's, at this point, what we need to do. But what we have to do is, I think, provide alternative or alternatives. And we have the summer to sort of think that over, to some extent, depending on the Neshi report. But we'll talk about that when we come to that point in the agenda.
You know, Robin, it has always reminded me of that, you know, the story of King Solomon trying to figure out who the baby's mother was. You know, Jake Ian testified in front of the legislature that he refuses to close even one college, and that's his commitment. The solution is to close them all, essentially, right? It shows you what happens when you don't have a real investment and appreciation for what we do and how it's done, right? And it's certainly missing. And that's why we are the people who should be finding the solutions.
We're the mothers. We're the mothers.
Yeah,
Mothers.
exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
Much so. There's so many people in this group who actually made this thing what it is, right? Yeah.
Well, and I think for some of us to come up with alternatives when we felt that what we were doing was having impact and we were doing good work and we were advancing our colleges and we were getting responses from our self-studies saying that we were on track and we were doing the right things. And so we felt many of us feel as though there was nothing wrong, that they created a problem so that they can impose a solution. But the problem's not real. And so, the problem wouldn't be real in particular if they funded us the way they funded us, even 10 years ago. So I don't know how you come up with an alternative solution to a problem that most of us don't believe exists. That's the problem for me, David.
Yeah, I understand your point, Ron. We've talked about it before. It seems to me that a really bad solution is going to what Students First proposes, but I'm not sure that the ideal solution is returning to how it was before. In the following sense, I think that the notion of some shared services and some form of interinstitutional cooperation, perhaps on a regional basis, that needs to be included in any alternative that we propose. And in fact, it's already happening. I mean, if you look at just what's happening to the community college faculty, you folks are all cooperating much more between institutions and among the institutions than you did before, created obviously and unfortunately by the Students First process, but that is nonetheless a positive byproduct. So it seems to me that in terms of alternate solutions, and we certainly have the whole summer to come back and discuss and debate this, shared services on a rational basis of mutual consent and agreement, and whatever forms of regional coordination that might be beneficial, we do need to make some suggestions for improvements.
Okay.
Well, at any rate, this was an interesting debate. Let's, if there's no more, we're going to come back to this. This is going to be, since we're going to be meeting over the summer, here's an agenda item for us to discuss. Point 4 on the agenda is the Board of Regents progress report to Neshi. Paulina, did you want to take this? Oh, sorry, point 3. Actually, we had this issue concerning our comments and reports at board meetings. Again, it's Colina.
Okay. Well, yeah, so as vice chair, I guess it's my responsibility to present reports. When I made a request to do that for this upcoming board meeting, remember we were going to be preparing comments at this meeting. Dave and I were told that our opportunity to do so had been already spent at the April meeting, which actually was our first. So we introduced ourselves and made some comments about what we'd done so far by way of introduction, but that was about it. So yeah, so we're going to kind of push back, but thought we would discuss here. And honestly, so much was going on that it was worth taking a moment to see what came of it, and if anything, appeal to perhaps provide that report at the next meeting. But really, the FAC has provided no report to the BOR officially this semester, and the question is whether we want to push to make it happen at the next meeting. I will say thus far, we know that, but it's worth putting some things on the record.
I think one way to do that, Fran count, would be, for example, David's report to the FAC. If we could just make a motion to forward that to the BOR, or I don't want to make more work for somebody or shorten the version of that, but that's pretty comprehensive.
All right, yeah, and so we can prepare something for next month, but just so you know, that's the situation at the moment. Do we move on to the next item?
Yeah, I think we've given notice. I mean, we're going to speak up more at the meetings, and I think that's going to be a surprise for them, because they sort of assumed up to now that the FAC would only have this semi-annual report, and that would be that. And I think we're going to participate more, especially when it comes to the item coming up on the on NESHE and also on the college and career success course.
Mhm.
But I can update the report that I just made or the document that I submitted here, and we can submit it to the board for inclusion in their agenda as a report from the chair of the FAC.
Okay.
And then
And
see
do,
what happens there. So I'm going to ask that they include it in their agenda as a report from the chair, not from the FAC, but from the chair of the FAC. It's on my signature. And let's see what
that
happens.
is saying, okay.
I think that's a great idea.
Hmm.
We've discussed it. It's been received by the FAC. I said I would add something about the system office expenses, and I'll send it in.
Does it help if we have a vote of endorsement? So it's, yes, it's from the chair, but the FAC has endorsed it?
If you wish to move the motion, go ahead.
Well, I'll move, but I can't vote. I'll move.
Second.
Again,
Lois, can you take the mover and the seconder? Do you have that?
Moving is Robin, right? Robin?
yes, it was Robin.
Okay,
And seconded was?
I don't need second.
I'd be happy to claim it, David Stoloff, but that's all right.
Okay. Let's put down David Stoloff a second, even if we don't need it.
Okay.
How do you want to proceed to the vote? Do you want a roll call vote? Do you want ayes and nays? Do you want me to set up a poll?
Let's
For
do
a roll
Ace.
call, because oh, sorry, I can't see anyone.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Lois, could you do a roll call vote?
I would have to, hold on, I don't have a list of the people who actually can vote. Wait a sec.
Okay. Give you a minute.
You're kidding me.
Okay,
Suggest it's hard to know who's there, and then if someone is an alternate, they would need to know if they were meant to speak.
Right. Is there any alternates who need to know if they can vote? Well, why don't you do the following, Lois. If you call the voting members and you're an alternate and you don't hear the person called from your institution, then you can vote.
yeah,
And inform Lois afterwards.
okay. Oh, come on. All right, so Lois Amy, aye. David Blitz,
Aye.
Paul, no, Patrice,
I'm going to abstain. Did you hear me?
yes, I heard her. Wait one sec. Myrna? Myrna?
Aye.
Jen? Jen?
Are you saying Jen Long?
Yes.
So Barbara's absent today?
Oh, no, I'm here. I didn't hear my name called.
Oh, I'm her.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
But I'd vote aye.
Okay. William Lugo?
He's not here. David Stoloff voting aye. As stolen it.
Okay. Kalina? Kalina?
You're muted, Kalina.
Aye.
Mike Shea?
Aye.
Linda Wilder?
I abstain.
Okay, I think I've got everybody.
Did I win?
We've
I
got,
win?
we've got 10 voting members, right?
Yes.
So I've got 9. Hold on a sec.
I think you missed me. I was on mute. This is Mary Beth.
Mary Beth, okay.
I vote aye.
Okay. So 8 ayes and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. And I will add to it what I showed you on screen, which is the increase in the budget of the system office.
Okay.
Now we are at, I'm looking for our agenda again. I can't find. Point 4, the Board of Regents report to NESHE, and in general, what's happening at NESHE. Kalina, do you want to take this as well?
So I guess we all had access to it, so I'll just ask what people have to say. But I will note that I just noticed this. I don't know if everybody else did, that there were letters of support for Students First from governor, from the chair of the SAC, though she's just finished her term, and workforce development. The governor's letter is not very substantive, but the other 2 actually have some points about why they support. But yeah, NESHE progress report, all I really have to say is I'm not quite sure they did the job. I mean, there was a challenge to address a number of standards, and I'm not clear that that was really accomplished. Anyone else? I know Ron read it really carefully.
This is Lois. They did not address any of the items that we put in the public comments that NESHE sent Ojaki a letter on February 5th, citing 16 substandards that they had to address, and they addressed none of them.
In terms of what I looked at, one of my areas of concern as the co-chair of the state assessment council was I found it very interesting that it pointed out that the provost would name an assessment council, given that we already exist. But we've been ignored for the last for a little over a year, about a year and a half. We've been completely ignored. So I thought that was a little bit of a cynical thing to put that in there, given that there already is an assessment council that has been sidelined as they create curriculum without outcomes and without sort of way to assess the student performance in those in those areas. The other thing that I found really interesting, and I think Kalina mentioned this earlier, is that we're all in danger of going bankrupt, okay, except that because of COVID, our enrollment's going to increase. But it's only going to increase after the consolidation. It won't increase if we all stay at 12 colleges. COVID only cares about consolidation. And so therefore, we will have increasing enrollment by, I think, 25% or something like that, okay, once the consolidation is in place. Okay, but not a minute before, and the 12 colleges won't benefit from the COVID increase. Only the 1 college can benefit from the COVID increase because viruses like unity. And obviously I'm totally tongue in cheek, but that seemed to be the message in the report, which I found really amusing.
This is Fran Cohn. A lot of what's in there are simply assertions backed by nothing. Assertions repeated over and over again, I guess, to be more convincing. And some of it's amazing. I'm looking at the shared governance section where they're talking about the faculty having substantive control over this. And on the other hand, the CSCC president, the chief academic officer, and the CFO are going to be put on the shared governance group. So who actually controls that committee in that case? It's hard to believe anyone reading this is going to be convinced by it if they have any idea of how higher education works. I'm astonished.
This is Lois again. I just want to throw out something to show how kind of irrational this report is and how full of half-truths. On page 17, where they're talking about maintaining the accreditation of the 12 community colleges during the transition, there's a sentence in there about the Family Economic Security Program that was initially created at Norwalk Community College, has now been adopted at Housatonic and Gateway Colleges. All three are part of Region 3 Shoreline West. So they're making that statement to show how the regional schools are working together really well. Well, it turns out Norwalk Community College no longer has the Family Economic Security Program, and we have not had it for a couple of years. And Housatonic actually had it way before they talked about this consolidation thing. So none of this is all pretty much untrue.
What is the date that NESHE will be meeting? It's coming up in June, isn't it?
June 23, 24.
Okay. And what is our expectation of when we would have access to their report?
They're probably not going to respond. Historically, from what we've seen, they are probably not going to respond until sometime in August, is my guess. Or September, yeah.
This is Paul. If I could just note that Seth Freeman and I had a long talk last night, and like other colleges, Capital has been short on counselors for quite a while. We have been approved to hire 3 counselors, and what we're going to try to do is use the organizational chart as leverage. And so early next week, I'm going to be sending an email to the College Senate. I'm the chair of the Senate. But with that email, I'm going to forward our thoughts to our new CEO and essentially demand, for lack of a better word, that the college hire these 3 counselors that have been approved. And our argument, of course, is going to be that throughout the new org chart, they're hiring all these counselors of this and counselors of that. And since we've already been approved, the money is obviously there within the system, and that we need to hire our counselors within our own institution.
So your Capital isn't part. When are you guys scheduled to get your advisors?
Right. Though our advisors were approved to hire prior to all of this. And so, and they just never have, because we've been told we don't have the money. So that's what we're going to say. The money's obviously there with all of these new hires on this org chart. So we need our counselors now, and you need to get them, essentially. And don't say we don't have any money.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I was thinking advisors for some reason, and counselors is what we need right now. Can I just back up for a second? I think I forgot that not all of us have all of this information. So just about the chart itself, I did mention, I mean, not the chart, the update. I did mention the letters in support. I forgot to mention the letters that went in support of our comments and of the CSCU comments that Lois and Stephen Adair wrote. And the CCRC, right? So the group of retired college presidents sent something in support of those comments against Students First. Let's see. 3 legislators. So one, the outgoing chair of the Higher Ed Committee, and one, the incoming chair of the Higher Ed Committee. So that's Turco and Haddad, and May Flexer also signed that with them. The former Regent Bill McGurk also sent something in also against, no, yes, I guess that's what we're saying, in support of the comments that we prepared and the CSCU prepared. And I am missing one. Legislators, Lois, CCRC.
Yeah, see, Connecticut Community College Roundtable,
Right? Who am I missing?
Bill McGurk, Greg Haddad, and two others.
Uh-huh.
And hmm.
Well, are you thinking the FAC report? We sent one.
Yeah, so but also in support of those. Maybe I am just thinking of the total number.
No,
All right.
I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any other discussion on this point? If not, let's move on to the college and career success course issues. And that would be Polina again.
There's so much drama in the community colleges, man. Okay, so I hope you all took a look at what I sent to you in terms of the little write-up. So there are three main areas of concern. One is, so first of all, CCS 101 is a course. It's worth 3 credits. And the resolution that was passed requires that all students in all programs take it within their first 9 credits, right? Oh no, I forgot something. Okay, anyway. Take it within their first 9 credits. So this is a mandated course for all students. And, you know, one of the first questions I had was, this sounds like Gen Ed, right? Why wasn't it part of the Gen Ed? And I knew the answer to that question, but I wanted to know why. And the answer is that it was part of the original Gen Ed proposal last year. There was an uproar at most of the campuses. I know that like people got very angry at Gateway when we were kind of told that, you know, this design team knew better about what our students needed than we did. And so it was removed from the Gen Ed proposal. And I remember and the Gen Ed committee apparently was told that's fine. We can just get it approved without you, which is precisely what has actually happened. So this went from I think it's the HASER team, right? To basically through Guided Pathways Task Force to the CCIC, and then straight to the board. As far as I know, I'm the only member of faculty who's really gotten to say anything about its final form. So the process, when I challenged it, you know, I said, this seems to me to be curriculum. Why isn't it treated as curriculum? Because it's not the normal curricular process. It's not even this like TAP-like process that they've committed to for the for students first. And the explanation was, it's not curriculum, it's a parameter. And you'll notice late last night, I just kind of directed everybody's attention to the conversation that actually took place at the meeting, because quite honestly, I wanted to make sure that I was reporting accurately. And I went back, you know, to listen. I listened back to it and I felt crazy all over again. It's exchange about, but it's a course. No, it isn't. It's a parameter. So, yeah. So, you know, you'll see that the end of the resolution it strongly encourages faculty to make sure that NETCHI standard 4.5 is satisfied. That's about the quality of the curriculum. But one of the main reasons that faculty pushed back in the first place is that because of credit normalization, inserting a 3-credit course that has nothing to do with your program and has everything to do, it seems, with what we assumed good advising would provide, really just dilutes the quality of the academic content of your program. That's one problem. The other issue is that if you say, well, oh no, we can increase the number of credits in the program, then we have it that we're kind of charging students at the cost of 3 credits to pay for their own advising in a certain way. And of course, the claim is made that no, this isn't just advising, this is true academic content. And if you look at what is claimed in the document, it says that this course will also achieve outcomes connected to writing, continued learning and information literacy, critical thinking, communication, and it will be the course vetted for diversity, right? So the Gen Ed the Gen Ed now requires that you take at least one course that's vetted for diversity, and they are hoping that this is the course, okay? I don't know how you accomplish that all in one class. And truthfully, they didn't actually commit to that. I think Greg DeSantis suggested that it might be vetted for CLL only. So there's a whole section that defends these credits based on that. It's maybe not written particularly clearly, but it definitely is committed to satisfying the diversity requirement. That is the intention. And I think the way that this report reads is very unfortunate. I wish the regents had paid attention to that fact. And no matter what good intentions we attribute to the people who wrote this report, the fact is the way that it reads, it emphasizes conformity to white middle class norms and completely dismisses any commitment to actually hearing from people who are not white and middle class, right? So you would hope that a diversity course would insist upon like deep engagement with diverse sources, right? And you would hope that that would come from a person who's an expert in that field. But this course attempts to do a lot of things at once. It's not clear how someone could actually be qualified to do all these things at the same time. Which means that I think that diversity and equity will get sidelined because there are 4 outcomes written for this course, and they all have to do with developing your own academic plan and following it through. That's really what it is. So to call this a diversity course, to emphasize the necessity of conforming with the very kind of system that disadvantages folks of color without in any way emphasizing the need for engaging with critique of, let's say, those very structures, to me is we've seen article after article after article in the newspaper bemoaning the fate of our students of color and talking about the commitment to addressing this issue. And this is not a good look, I would say. And I know that we can attribute all the best intentions, but lots of harm has come from best intentions. So if the proper care was not taken in the report, you have to ask yourself whether the proper care will be taken in the implementation. And thus far, I have no reason to trust that the proper care will be taken. So, there's all of that. Then there's just basic logistics. What the heck will this cost? How many sections of this do you have simultaneously? What happens to students who just want to drop in, take a few credits in between, one college and the next, or while they're transferring? Because then you're going to have to do waivers for all of those students. Will they be afforded waivers? And who, again, will be qualified to teach this course? I have no idea. So yeah, that's what I have to say about it. And again, I am the only member of faculty who's had anything to say about it, so I indulged myself at the ASA meeting.
I'll add to what Kalina said. In terms of, it says that there are 4 outcomes, but if you read the outcomes, they're all compound. It's impossible. You could not create a rubric from any of those outcomes to score students on their performance. You just couldn't. They are actually, there's about four outcomes within each one. So it's more like 16 outcomes, and then they want to add diversity outcomes to it. Now, diversity hasn't even been defined yet. There's not even a diversity committee yet to create and so for them to do this, it's such a cynical move to piggyback on the protest movements that's moving through the United States. It's just really, really sad. In terms of the way in which this is being presented. I mean, they already are saying that the course does all things for all people. And typically when a course, and by the way, before I went back to faculty, I was leading and before I realized that what I had to say didn't matter, I was leading the guided pathways efforts at my college. Okay, and then I realized that they weren't going to let us do it our way. They had already decided what they were going to do, and that's when I got out of the whole movement. But while I was in, I did a lot of research on first year experience classes and college success courses. And over again, the warning was these courses become a dumping ground for every idea that anybody ever has about student retention, and they get overwhelmed with everything and the kitchen sink, and nobody can teach it. It's not taught well if it is taught, and that's exactly what this looks like. If you look at the way in which they've listed, how many competency areas from the gen ed do they think this is going to fulfill, and then diversity, which requires really precise expertise to teach that. Diversity is one of the most difficult things to teach. And for them to say that they're going to be able to, assign it to just, hundreds of faculty, when I think at my college there may be 3 people probably qualified to teach diversity at my college. And so it's scary. It's really scary, this course that they've constructed. It's a Frankenstein monster, actually.
Thanks, Ron. This is Jen Long. I also wanted to speak about the FYE course. I'm not sure if, I'm assuming everyone in this group knows this already, but the challenge with the English side of that course is that there's writing and information literacy required in it. And what has happened is that we see developmental students, because there's no prereq, going into FYE, writing papers. The FYE teacher, who's not an English professor, giving them inflated grades on their writing, and then they're coming back to say English 096, and they're like, why am I getting a D on a paper in a developmental English class and an A in a college level course? And that's been an ongoing problem. And in terms of also the academic rigor as well. So I absolutely agree that with Colina that the diversity piece is the most pressing thing, but I wanted to mention that the English component of the writing version of the course, which I think you've all highlighted, is the also another long-standing issue with this course as well.
And Jen, I asked because they highlighted FYE, and they mentioned that Manchester had in May adopted this course in their curriculum. But I did ask, I know that Three Rivers does FYE. I know Norwalk does, Naugatuck Valley. There are many colleges that do FYE. And I asked whether they were as successful or if they had, if they had incorporated the information from those, and they hadn't. I mean, they said they just hadn't received that information, but again, this is a matter of taking great care to make sure that this thing that is supposed to solve all of our problems is executed well, and it doesn't seem.
Colina and Naugatuck Valley, they would not want to see our success rate on that course. It would not help their cause.
Right.
I mean, what it's become at Three Rivers has been a sort of, politely, it's been sort of the people in charge of the program have a friend and they're like, hey, I'd like to teach a college class and I have a master's in whatever. Oh, you teach FYE. That's kind of like how teaching the class. Don't complain about it. That they don't have anything to do for their career right away. They feel like they're being steered too much about. They don't feel like they have any understanding of what they're being asked to do in their writing assignments or any understanding of how it's being assessed. And most of them, there are some who care, but I think as community be built in any class. But I think the students with whom I speak, it's
This is Barbara. I wanted to say that I'm concerned that this course gets used. We have a course that's not the same, but it has the same feeling of not really being a serious course. And the only way they decide who can do it is they have a little training thing to train people to do it, but a lot of staff people do it to earn extra money. This is a course they can be quote unquote qualified to teach by taking a quickie training course, but it means that it's a superficial sort of, I just think in the future, I don't think there's any way to beat this stuff right now. They're just inexorable. They just take the next step. They don't care what anybody says, but we have to remember that someday there are going to be huge problems with this course. And at that point, let's look also at the economics of who's supporting it and who gets to get, you know, $10,000 or more if you do summers a year to teach this course when they're not qualified to teach anything else.
I know, David, that you want us to provide constructive alternatives, but I'm just really insulted by this, and I'm not sure that we should respond.
I agree with you on that point. I don't have any constructive alternatives. We've tried at Central, at the university level, at least a half a dozen different models of FYE courses. All of the problems that you mentioned, we've had them all, and now they're going through a 7th iteration. There are faculty who think this is the Holy Grail, but we never quite, you know, catch the ring. And it's a big problem. But I think that one thing that we can do is to ask at the board meeting, the next board meeting, which is coming up on Thursday, that this be removed from the consent agenda and we actually discuss it at the board, and that the objections which are being voiced here be brought to their attention. Not least of which is the highly objectionable statement that appears in the accompanying research report. Now, that was done by apparently a presidential fellow at the Guided Pathways program, Mr. Wong. I don't know who that is. I don't see him listed as a system officer in their directory, but it looks to me like a graduate student, maybe a PhD candidate somewhere at UConn. But certainly, Colina drew this to my attention, and you know we should all look at it very carefully. It's unbelievable that this is simply included in the agenda for the Board of Regents, and they're approving this, or at the very least receiving it, in the consent agenda. It says, second, success in college requires students to model new behaviors that are specific to the culture of higher education. These behaviors include speaking and writing in academic language, actively participating in class, interacting with professors, adapting to different instructors' teaching styles and classrooms' expectations, and navigating bureaucratic systems like financial aid and transfer. And actually, here's a reference for it. It is important to note that collegiate expectations of, quote, proper behavior are rooted in capital W white middle-class norms. Thus, they can be especially difficult to perform for students who did not grow up in that culture or have family members who attended college.
I think that it's insulting that this is being proposed as a way to address diversity and social inequality problems. I really think it should be dismissed outright as just insulting and beneath us as a higher education system.
Yes, I think Melina, I don't know if you want to make a proposal to the board. I mean, I think, can we make resolutions even though we can't vote on them?
Hey, just before you guys, just let me say, this is Mike Shea. I just want to report from Southern, there is a very, 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 very successful FYE program, just so you need to be aware of that. And it's been going on for, let's see, 15 years at this point, maybe 12. And it's been pretty successful. It's raised a lot of retention issues. It's helped a lot of freshmen. So just be aware that it can be done right. Even though I know about how it can be done and wrong. And I'm not at all endorsing this the idea from the curriculum committee. I'm just saying there are such things that work, and it's a 3-credit course, and it involves writing and research, and it also introduces people to the college experience in ways that this paragraph says it's kind of appropriate. It's actually kind of right. A lot of the students don't know how to be in college, and this helps them. So I just want you all to know that. And Bill,
Could you send along the link and the reference to that? Because we have
I'm
a
sorry.
task force.
This is a critical point in the history of this state, in the history of this country. This is a historic point. I think calling this a first-year experience is one thing. Saying that this addresses diversity issues in any way, I really think is insulting.
Where is it saying that it addresses diversity issues?
There's a section on page, I think it's 120, that the question that it's titled, how does this satisfy the diversity requirement? And I made sure to clarify this at the meeting because I really wasn't.
Yeah, it's here. Whereas the General Education Corps has been established to include competency requirements as well as a diversity requirement.
Okay, and that is the diversity requirement, the FYE?
That is the diversity requirement. And I will at all 12 colleges, the one thing that seemed to be received quite positively so far is that diversity requirement. We recognize the need for it. There's some disagreement about whether it should be a gen ed requirement or whether it should be something that you can take further on, at a higher level course or whatever. But
embedded in other courses.
And I also don't want to jump all over. I mean, that research is valid. Those facts that is a fact. And I understand how difficult it is addressing these sorts of issues. I was tripping all over myself in that meeting, just trying to talk about this in a way that didn't make everything super uncomfortable. So this is well-meaning. The problem is there is a lack of understanding and there's way too much haste, right? The diversity requirement, remember before our last meeting, it was removed by the SFASACC because there wasn't enough time to develop a diversity course and figure out what that requirement should be. Then it was reinserted by the CCIC because they realized that probably wasn't a great idea to just remove the diversity requirement. A re-edition of the diversity requirement was put into the report. The report was changed at the last minute and thrown in, right? So 2 days before the last month's ASA meeting. So they have very little time to figure that out. This is about haste, and this is about not taking it, as a result, not taking it seriously enough. But the net effect is that they've basically taken the diversity requirement away from us again by making this diversity requirement.
This is Lois, can I just make a comment about the fact that quote, that, as far as I'm concerned, very offensive quote to Laura, which is attributed to Laura Rendon, is taken completely out of context. Laura Rendon is well known for her research on validation theory, and her research is focused on low-income first-generation students, and that quote is completely out of context.
Well, I just wanted to say that I agree 100% with what Kalina was saying. I just think it's important that we understand that FYE courses can work even though they're complicated. That's different from it counting as a diversity requirement. And anything that Kalina said about the research about FYE and all of that, I think we need to just make sure we're aware of that as we make this objection.
Thanks, Mike. This is Jen Long.
Has Southern worked with the group at all since
Well,
it is?
you know what? It's interesting. When I heard that group was going to come up with an FYE requirement, I asked Nicole, who is the head of the FYE program, she's from the English department, at Southern, whether they would be involved in that, and she didn't know. I don't think they were ever really fully involved, or if they did get involved, I think it was just at the initial stage, and they didn't necessarily follow through. So I don't know for 100%, Kalina, but I don't think I would have thought that they would turn to Southern as a model for how to make FYE work, and I'm not sure they did.
Mike, this is Jen Long. I was just wondering, do the English faculty teach the course, or are you guys just confident with how the writing is assessed, or how does that work?
It's mixed. It's not just English. It's anybody. It's the same situation you all were talking about. Sometimes there are non-teaching faculty teach some of the courses, but history, any faculty member from any discipline can teach it and does teach in it. But it's not covered simply by full-time faculty. There's some part-time English faculty and some part-time faculty from other departments, and there are also some staff people that do it.
Oh, I see. Because that's a different story at our campus at Three Rivers. It's almost entirely staff people who are, kind of looking to pick up a night class here or there.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. When I understood the objections before, I totally understand them. And we are afraid of some of those things happening at Southern. But what I would say that Southern Sun has addressed them at each stage. So the last couple of years, they've actually they've introduced that research has to be done, some writing has to be done. It's very minimal research, but it's very empowering for the students. It's hard to describe it all right now, but I would just say, as a person who finds those kinds of courses skeptical of those kinds of courses, I would say it works at Southern, and Bill might probably agree with me.
Yeah, and I want to just also say to Kalina that at Three Rivers, the faculty were very invested, I would say back in maybe 2008, 9, and 10 in creating an FYE course that was really strong. And we really believed that it could be done well, like Mike is describing. But like everything, it was taken out of our hands, and then it became a mandate, et cetera. And so I also just wanted to second what Mike said, that it can be done well, but I don't think it will be in this scenario.
I just want to say the one thing I think that helped was that it did stay under the control of a faculty member from English. And so she's been running it since it started, and that's made a difference because it's not simply an administrative mandate. So, sorry.
All right, this is Lois. I just want to say that at Norwalk, we have a successful FYE course. It's housed in our developmental studies area. The faculty member, the chair there, is also an English faculty. We are very much against all of this. We feel that FYE should be a local thing. It should be addressed to look at the concerns and the needs of our students, not system-wide students. Two of the colleges that they quote in this article as well, they talk about how they've adopted FYE courses and so forth. But if you look at it, one of them doesn't require it, but both of them have very diverse FYE courses. They are tailored. Students can take them tailored to their needs. It's not just one course, one size fits all, and that's it. And that's what we're afraid of, the one size fits all thing. We want control over it.
That's what it's a single course number, so it will be
Right.
single course, right?
Right. Yes.
The
Okay, this is Christine from Middlesex. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that we actually have been offering a college and career success course for a while, and so I do agree with Mike that it can be done well. But I think a key to that is that it is housed within humanities and specifically within English. But that doesn't mean necessarily that the English faculty teach it, but that the coordinator of the English department is the one who hires for that course. And so there is definite oversight. And we do have one English faculty teaching the course and who has taught it for a while, but there has been a push from administration to have more staff, service area staff, teach the course. So, but the way that this is written with the diversity, I think there are a lot of different courses embedded throughout our curriculum that would meet diversity more than this course. I don't think that that's what this course should be. I don't think it should be an outcome of this course. I mean, it's career focused.
Could I make a suggestion at this point? It seems to me that what we should do at the next board meeting, and I'll ask Kalina's opinion on this as well, is to request that this be taken out of the consent agenda, and that specifically the diversity component be removed from the course, and that the criticisms that Kalina has made about the logistics of it, who's going to teach it, how many sections, all of that has to be included if this is actually to be approved by the board as something obligatory for all community colleges.
Yeah, so I think it's off of the consent, but I do think we should make sure that we discuss it. And I plan to make as many of these points as I possibly can, because again, if I am so far the only member of faculty who has had a chance to be heard on this, I mean, that's just ridiculous. So I can make a pest of myself. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
In addition, though, there are a lot of people in this group who have experience with this, who have insight and a good perspective on this. And is it possible that we could, maybe we're giving it too much attention, but I think it's worthwhile. Could we get together and lay out a list of recommendations? Mike Shea, if you could participate in this, that would be excellent. If we could source some stuff from Southern. Just lay out a list of recommendations and questions and cautions that can be officially presented to the board next time. I didn't want to take the initiative of doing it myself because, again, it's just not right that it's all me. But I think we have a decent group here, and we can source more information from our colleges also.
I just wanted to respond to Mike's comment about not using Southern's expertise. That seems to be a trend in almost everything that they've done. For this course, I know that they hired an outside consultant from New Jersey, Christine, I think her last name was Harrington. I served on the Gen Ed Consolidation Committee, and she came and met with us and brought this proposal to us before we rejected it. But it seems as though the system office just doesn't trust faculty to do the jobs that we were hired to do. They go out and pay for consultants when we have expertise at Southern or we have expertise at any of our colleges. I mean, a system as large as ours, we have expertise in everything, and yet they keep going to consultants, or they keep going to, I think someone referred to the incestuous group of faculty in Hartford who have basically been moved there nearly permanently. So that's another systemic problem that at some point needs to be addressed. That the system office and the people leading things in Hartford need to recognize that the faculty throughout the system have expertise in all of the things that they are hiring other people from outside to do, which seems to be an incredible waste of taxpayer money.
Yes, and this is Jen Long again. I think that what makes Southern's FYE program so strong also is that it's taught by faculty, mostly faculty people, and that it helps students make connections early on in their career with faculty of teach classes they might not have taken yet. And Polina, that if I would be interested in working with you and Mike on a subcommittee to look at FYE to help. I don't know that I have enough expertise to make recommendations. I'm happy to brainstorm and research and help in any way I can.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'm looking forward to that.
Great. I just want to also notice that there is maybe a significant difference between an FYE course at the beginning of a student's career in a place that has open enrollment versus selective admissions, right? Because in addition to the diversity of all of our locations, and Southern is a single location. So in addition to the diversity of all of our locations, we have this extremely diverse level, interest, because think about the things that we offer. We offer everything from like technical programs to, you could be a liberal arts major, right? And the ability levels or the preparation levels are diverse also. So we have a unique sort of challenge. So it might, that's something to think about in terms of a single course across all 12 locations.
If I may, this is Myrna. I wanted to further comment on what you were saying, Kalina, as I speak with students coming in from the community college and our students moving to the community colleges, some who would like to complete an associate degree. When the document indicates all students, I would ask that they look at that very carefully, because there are some students who have several credits already, experienced in higher ed already, have diversity courses already, that if you make them take the CS 101 course, it's going to make them rethink going to the community colleges. So I want to make sure with that level of diversity that you just mentioned, that this should really be limited to first-year students with probably less than so many credits moving forward.
Are there any other comments? This obviously is a complicated issue, but Kalina, you're right. It's not on the consent agenda. I'm sorry. I read it's an item 8 after the consent agenda, which is item 7. So you'll have time to intervene on bring up some of the points that have been brought up here. Shall we go on now to item 6 on our agenda? And we want to make sure that we have time for item 7 as well, which is important, like going back to campus or whatever in the fall. Item 6 is additional responsibilities credit for fall online and remote learning preparation. It's related to the return to campus, although I think that item 7 is more on the healthcare side of things.
So, Fran Cohen, I think I requested this be put. Yeah. I'd like to poll my community college colleagues on the committee. My experience and the experience of the faculty at Tunxus is thus. I think it was late April, we got an email from our academic dean asking us to begin preparing our additional responsibilities proposals. And in her email was listed a set of priorities, all of which were clearly dictated to her from the provost. And they were work on consolidation committees and work groups. And then a secondary list was work on college initiatives. As part of this, we were allowed some additional responsibility credit for preparing for the possibility, or really probability, I think, of teaching remotely or online in the fall. But the formula was incredibly punitive, or not really acknowledging all of the work the faculty did in the spring and they will have to do for the fall. The formula which we received is you will receive 22.5 hours for every preparation, so long as it is a course that was never taught online at Tunxus before, ever, by anybody. It was a very bizarre formulation. So one, it's very few hours. It's nowhere near enough hours to actually create a remote or online course from scratch, which many people have to do. And then 2, there was that other caveat. If it's ever been taught before by anybody, I can't give you any credit whatsoever. So I just want to compare notes, first of all, briefly with my other colleagues. Did you receive something like
that? This is Barbara. I had the opposite experience. I've been talking with the union. They have a letter on this. They have a side letter of agreement. And I'm getting, I'm doing no additional responsibilities in the fall because I'm teaching 4 online courses straight, and 3 of those are the same course, and that's okay too.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we
you have to talk to the union. They consider this a union issue, straight up.
This was my, I was going to think it's a union issue. That doesn't mean I agree with the union. I'm not sure we want to start the work there. It might be worth saying to them, some union leaders, what our concerns are from the trenches, because different union leaders have different teaching experiences. I think the one thing we have to be careful of, though, the thing that always scares me is that in the last election, Bob Stefanowski got more votes than anybody ever in Connecticut governor race, except Ned Lamont this go round. And I think we really need to be worried about be looking forward to a time if Republicans get back in, this is all going to be 100 times worse. Going to be cut. I mean, you can even see Ned Lamont just recently, 2 days ago, was asking for us to forego our raises. I think we have to be really careful about being aware of how lucky we are to have the jobs we have, A, in faculty, B, and how much I think people are eyeing to save money there. So I just think we need to be careful about how. I'd rather leave this to the unions myself.
I think my point would be, I don't mean to come across as belly aching. We can do that. And I agree with you, Mike. This probably isn't the time or the place to do it. But, and if this is unique to my college, then I will pursue that with the union. But if it isn't, then this is amazing that the system would place really pressure on faculty to do the consolidation work rather than to prepare their own courses for their own students in the fall. And that's really why I brought it here. That is an incredibly misplaced set of priorities. So what I wanted to find out is this coming from the system, or is this more unique to my college? If it's unique to my college, then I'll pursue it.
I can give you an update what's happening at Middlesex with that. The preparing for online or remote learning was an option.
Christine, can you speak up a little? I can't hear.
I can't hear you, Christine.
My volume. Sorry. Can you guys hear me now? Is that better?
A little bit.
Only a little better?
Only a little better, yes.
Shoot, I don't know. Is that better? I mean, the volume's up as now. If it's too frustrating, that's okay. I can. Can you guys hear me or now?
Yes, just got to speak up a little bit, but we can hear you.
Okay. So what I was saying is that at Middlesex, preparing for online or remote learning was an option under the heading curriculum, but it was the last option among all the others, which were all consolidation work items. But we didn't have a number assigned to preparing for online or remote learning. So we weren't given, only worth 20 hours or whatever a course. So, and I have a really supportive dean who said to please only choose like 2 items, and they certainly weren't pushed. The consolidation committees were not pushed on my campus.
This is Mary Beth from Ms. Nuntuck. The only information that I have on this is my own, because we really haven't discussed this as a faculty. But I was told that my dean was going to approve a maximum of 3 hours. And I actually only had 2 hours approved because one of my classes had already been prepped to be taught online. So that's the information I have. We did get multiple emails from our campus union reps, basically saying any issues that you have with this, make sure you're CCing the union and getting the union involved. So that's the only information I have. I do believe that other people on my campus were also told that 3 hours was the maximum that they could put on their ARs.
And this is Colina. I got the exact same information. No more than 3 hours, which is actually less than is usually assigned. But that seems consistent with what we're doing at Gateway.
This is Ron at Naugatuck. I did have a faculty member contact me this week to say that her ARs were rejected, and she was told she could only get 1 hour. So, and I don't know what the details are beyond, in terms of what else she was doing, but she was told that she could only get 1 hour.
This is Barbara. I just want to say I had no idea this was going on other campuses, but what I was told by the union people is that the letter that they have of agreement says 3 hours per online course, and they're actually negotiating for compensation if you do a 4th.
Hi, Barbara. I put in for that. and it was rejected, and I had to revise. And I was told that that's what's consistent with what they're doing at Gateway. 1 credit per 3-credit course with a maximum of 3 hours.
That's not nearly.
I know the union is asking everyone to send in information, and hopefully this will get resolved through their intervention. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, is there any other comment on this item? Then if not, let's go on to an important issue, obviously. And we can come back to it at our next meeting because we have time before our classes begin in the fall. But speaking of classes beginning in the fall, campus return policies. Mike, could you take over here?
Yeah, I have to say I'm teaching 2 summer courses and I haven't done more than send the documents. I tweaked them a little bit before I sent them to David and Colina, but I haven't gone back to them. And Bill Faraklis, who's visiting us today, it had written these as a member of one. We had several committees made up of faculty and staff that were working on reopening at Southern. That I guess every campus did that back in late May, early May, and had to get something in within a few days to the leadership. And Bill had written these concerns about returning, and to me, they for what we'd be able to say. And I think it's especially appropriate since it doesn't seem like these 2 documents that Bill wrote got a lot necessarily of attention at Southern. And maybe at this point, I should just let Bill speak since he wrote them. I just tweaked a few little things, but it seems to me they capture the issues that Barbara was concerned about last time, which made me say I'd look into this. I'm concerned. I don't want to go back to campus without or be on ground without a vaccine or some sort of massive testing in the country, not just in the schools. So maybe I should let Bill take it over and explain further. But what I think we could do is endorse these positions as in the statement as the FAC. So Bill, do you want to speak anything about this since you wrote them and you were on that committee?
I didn't come prepared comments. I was expecting more to take questions, but I would like to point out that of the 2 documents, the principles document, I think, stands on its own 2 feet. The recommendations for a scheduling plan includes information that now is dated. But I think the concepts still hold, and I think there's plenty of other information that could be incorporated. For example, what is being seen now is an increase in cases in many states. I think there were estimates of 20 states, but I think it's more like about 12 states where we're seeing spikes. There are concerns about other places. This is, at this point, not the result of people protesting in public. There hasn't been enough time for that effect. So far what we're seeing is simply the effect of states reopening. And I think we'll see another effect of people being in crowded situations during the protests. So,
Bill, let me just interrupt. That is a professor of public health. I should have mentioned that. It's not, so he obviously knows what he's talking about. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. I think the most important points are that the virus has not changed. Changes in our experience have to do with changes in our behavior mostly. I think there are some flaws in believing that we can actually use our classrooms effectively with only a few people in them. 6 feet apart is not a magic number. It's just a parameter that somebody came up with. It has some effect, but we know that sneezes can travel across a room. We also know that people are not necessarily effective in using protective equipment like gloves and masks. There's such a thing as fomites, which are inanimate objects that can hold disease, like doorknobs and desktops. There would have to be plans for disinfecting classrooms between every use. And if you just do a basic layout of a classroom and try to keep people 6 feet apart, there are a lot of problems. You can have very few people in the room. You have somebody who's sitting off in the far corner, farthest from the door, who needs to get up to leave the classroom to go to the restroom, who will inevitably have to walk closer than 6 feet to somebody to get out. And then there's the question of the safety of the instructor, of course, which is very, very important. So we have concerns about what happens when you put people, at least at the college, at the universities, in residence halls where they are sharing bathrooms. And you just imagine somebody going in to brush teeth and using a sink and not doing a good job of cleaning the sink afterward, and perhaps not perceiving that it is her or his job to clean that sink thoroughly. There are all kinds of things that can occur. Contact tracing, it will be a very powerful, but contact tracing for a disease like coronavirus is always an after the fact sort of a thing, right? Asymptomatic people spread disease. 4 days later, they have symptoms. We find out they're sick. And then basically we go and tell other people, you might be sick. Right? And then there is the secondary effect that we can ask them to self-quarantine, or we can quarantine those people, which is disruptive again to the way they're participating in class if it's on ground. But we haven't necessarily prevented their getting coronavirus. So there are just so many moving parts, and I think the smart way to look at this is to be very, very cautious, because as I said at the very beginning of these brief, the virus hasn't changed. It's only our having changed that intervened with the rapid acceleration of infection. So I understand that there are business interests here. I understand that people are worried about enrollment. That's a real concern. I think we're all concerned about that. But we allowed ourselves the space that was needed when we abandoned our campuses during the spring semester. We did that because it was the smart and safe thing to do. So rushing back to our campuses with an equation that acknowledges that a certain proportion of our students, our staff, and our faculty will get sick and a few people will die, that's the reality of what the current plan brings to the table.
Bill, this is Lois. I have a question for you. How concerned should we be about the ventilation systems in our buildings? I'm at Norwalk, and one of the building I'm in was probably built in the 60s, maybe, I'm guessing. The ventilating system is really bad to begin with. We know that because of air conditioning and heating issues, and we can't open windows.
Right. So technically, we don't know, and here's why. At present time, it is believed that coronavirus is basically not an airborne disease. But it does become aerosolized, which means there are little particles floating around. The idea is that the particles are so small that they would not be sufficient to cause infection. But we don't really know that for sure. At first, it was believed that coronavirus could not be aerosolized at all. So it couldn't be floating around the room. It couldn't get into ventilation systems. Now it's acknowledged that it can be aerosolized. And at first it was believed, yes, but it won't infect anybody in that way. But now we're really not sure. So to answer your question, Lois, I think that's another unknown. And the thing is that if we are cautious, we don't say we're going to assume that there's safety when there are unknowns. We should assume that there might be danger.
Thanks, Bill.
And I just want to say, this is Mike again. I think we want to put these statements like this forward with the understanding. I don't yet feel like the administration is asking me to put my safety at risk. I think they've set it up so that we can stay home if we want and do online, which I appreciate. And I think we should acknowledge that part. But I also think we should reinforce the notion of erring on the side of assuming, as Bill was saying, that until we know for certain things, we should assume that things are risky rather than safe. I don't think it needs to be confrontational because I don't think even though they're putting that hybrid model forward, it's only for choice, and I think it's mainly for small labs and things like. I don't think they're expecting people to have to show up. So I think we should. I think we should state something and talk about principles of safety.
Mike, this is Jen Long, and at Three Rivers, there are a certain set of lecture courses that they are requiring to be on ground. And it came across from the chair to the English department recently, or that's all I can speak to, that we could argue that the class that has to be on ground could be moved, but that it was on us to have to generate a schedule that could show a student taking our class, that class with another couple classes, all in the same 2 days back to back, in order for them to. But they absolutely are. What's going to end up happening is that the full-time faculty probably are going to change their course. They're going to do the mapping to not have the section they're teaching be the on-ground one, or they're going to change their schedule. So what you're doing is you're putting a bunch of adjuncts who might need the money at risk then. And I just wanted to make that point. I agree that it's nice that they're letting most of us do the LRON classes or the online classes, but the Board of Regents is making some. It might not be common knowledge yet, but that is the plan, to make some lecture courses on ground, no matter what. And they're not budging on it, according to what I was told by my academic dean's assistant.
So Jen, can I just ask you, did that come from the administration, or did that come from the science departments that they wanted that?
No. So any course that has a lab course the instructors were able, the departments were able to decide if they wanted the classes to be on ground. And that's what, but these are classes that the administration was told to select, something like there has to be an earth science, there has to be a developmental English, there has to be a one composition course. Students, there have to be enough courses on, at least one course on in every discipline, I believe, so that a student could come on campus and make a schedule and generate that. And the only reason I don't think it's common knowledge right now, what happened was someone from our campus accidentally sent an email that they weren't supposed to yet. And so when I went and pushed back to my dean about it, my dean's assistant about it, he said they aren't really telling people about it yet, but the Board of Regents is absolutely making there be at least spatterings of on-ground classes that are lecture courses. I just think you guys haven't been told yet, but that's coming.
Can you forward that to us, or would that be wrong?
I don't think it would be the the best idea for me to do that because person was confiding in me.
Okay.
So to give you guys a heads up, I think you're going to be sent a chart from the department in charge that's going to show kind of the banner mod forms where you're going to be asked to argue. You may have already been asked to select what your preferences are, but at some point I think this is gonna and because my administration is really good about being cool about everything, so I think that for them to do this, it must be BOR mandate. Can't really know because my administration is usually kind.
Well, that's even more of a reason why we should put these principles forward, it seems to me.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Kalina.
Oh, I was just going to say that I feel like we should definitely make it clear that anyone who has to cover the courses should have health insurance provided by our system. Like, I think it's too risky that it'll probably be adjuncts who are sometimes underpaid and don't have access to healthcare, and that can't happen.
At our campus at WestCon, we were told, faculty can say what they prefer and what they don't prefer, but it's unacceptable for all of the classes to be online. So I don't know how that fits with this this messaging, but we were told explicitly it's not okay if all of them are online.
At CCSU, we haven't yet got anything very specific. They had all sorts of committees. But here's what was in the Finance Committee report, which has an obvious implication for the 4 universities. You can see, can you see actually this chart online? These are the predictions for decline in enrollment for the fall of 2020, and actually for the whole year. Eastern, which is largely residential, has the smallest decline because they think that students will show up in residence, and as you can see, they're expecting a residence occupancy rate of 83%. Remember that at the 4 universities, the biggest losses incurred during the pandemic so far were the refunds for residents and food plans. So if you look here at the numbers, it's on average about 3/4 or 73% occupancy, which they're expecting, 75% actually. So that's a factor. And of course, for someone like myself, you want to know, are students are they going to do a thermometer check or a temperature check for students and anybody entering the building? Will they be providing at least level N95 face masks for everybody? Because some people will show up without them. I know that they have a problem about cleaning the bathrooms. What about cleaning the classrooms? And then there's a final problem, which is the parking lots. And at a public university or community college, anybody can come into the parking lot, at least the public access area, and will they be checked? So there's lots of questions. But one of the driving forces economically at the 4 universities is the need to have residence occupancy rates, at least of 75%. And presumably that means that all of your classes can't be online.
Yeah, I think at Eastern, I think it's what I would call a bait and switch process. A letter came out this week from our provost that said that we did not, if we didn't want to have in-office hours, that we could, as long as we dedicated 5 hours to be available somewhere in the world, we'd be fine for our office hours. And then there was a statement that if we didn't think we'd be comfortable teaching on campus, that we could contact Maria Weinberger, who is like a temporary person in our human resources office. Some of you may recognize the name Weinberg. So it's really a switch and bait. It's that they can't tell the public that the campus will be primarily online because then the students won't come into the residence hall. But when they come into the residence hall, there'll be less of them, and I can't imagine how they're going to feed them. I'll stop.
Your mic.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, we have to invent a word for that pause while people are unmuting. But at any rate, Southern's. I think that David just made a really important point. Southern's president was on a couple of radio programs recently, where he spoke about Southern having a variety of venues, formats for offering courses. Some would be on ground, some would be online, some would be high flex, which if you really understand high flex, it's not a very good option for this scenario. But it's very popular because it sounds sexy, I guess. But I think it is bait and switch. I think the idea is that it's understood that some students don't want to come to campus. Some students want to come to campus. And so at least tell everybody that we're going to have all these options. And then as rates of infection begin to change, we can take the higher ground and say we would like to offer the courses on ground, but unfortunately you're all going to be online. I think that's self-destructive. I think it's much better to come up with a plan, to have something that is predictable for everybody. And yes, you'll lose some students either way, but to get a message out to students, a message that I think would be helpful, which is because we care about your safety, we are going to do what we did this past spring. But we are going to make sure that we support you in every way that we can. And it's honest. I think it's more believable. I had a conference call, a Zoom call with a student around 11 o'clock last night. She emailed me and said, I need to talk to you about the schedule for the fall. And I wrote back and said, well, I'm a night owl like you, evidently, so do you want to Zoom? And she jumped at it. And she really would prefer to be back on campus, just as I would be, all things being equal, right? Which they never are. But it gave me an opportunity to explain to her reasons why in the public health program, all of our courses are going to be online. And she understood the reasons, and she accepted it as something that was being done for her benefit, with a promise that her professors are going to be very conscientious in making sure that they attend to the needs of students the very best of our ability. And so that's the message we should be getting out, because what will happen is when we switch, if we switch last minute, students aren't going to complain to the administration. They're going to complain to faculty members. They're going to be disgruntled in our courses. And that puts an extra burden on us. And I think it disrupts the academic environment. That's pretty much, that's what I have to say. But you have somebody else in this meeting, Barbara Richards, who has been, I think, following developments in the coronavirus pandemic more closely than any of us, certainly even more closely than me. And I admire her for that. And I think she probably has a take on this as well.
That's a very nice thing to say. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I'm sitting here mostly thinking, I don't think this will be over by January. And I don't know if anybody, normally we start planning our courses right away in September for the next semester. And so this is not, I'm afraid that if they do develop a vaccine, it may not even be the right one because of the big rush to do it, no matter what, or it may turn out to be harmful, or anything could happen with the way the politics of this has been. And then I think it's really not going to be safe in the spring either.
May I add to that, Barbara? Tony Fauci is looking at an increase in maybe late October, certainly by November. There was a piece in the news yesterday about some work that was done looking at 15 million cell phone users and just tracking their whereabouts and their proximity to other people with cell phones that would be tracked. And in a number of places in this country, people are going back to pre-pandemic contact with other people. If we are told that after Thanksgiving we will not come back to our campuses because students will have gone home to their families and will have had exposure to their families, think about your students. Do you think they are going to wait until Thanksgiving to be in social settings, to be with their families? Many of them live with their families. Our students are eager, understandably, to get back to work because they need to have income. Many of them are going back to work now. More will be. And so I think there is a lot of wishful thinking. We don't have a handle on this virus, and there probably will be a treatment before there is a vaccine. But with the treatment, people will still get sick, and some people will get very, very sick. And by the way, just going back to
all that, yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to go back to the question about taking temperatures when people arrive on campus. Now, the science is saying that people can be asymptomatic, not have a fever, and be spreading the virus. So I don't want to sound like an alarmist, and I hope you won't take my comments that way. But I think there's a real competition here between the university's finance and the university finances or financial problems and the university's commitment to safety.
Yeah, I agree with everything Bill has said. I think it's been a great summary of where we stand and also a good way to put it that erring on the side of caution when you don't know the answer is the right thing to do.
Is there any further discussion or proposals?
I want to note that I live in West Hartford and I have small children, and we have heard that the West Hartford Public Schools will be back in session in the fall. I think the plan in West Hartford is for the little ones to spread out among the bigger schools and then the middle schoolers and up to be online. But I don't know how we'll be compared to the public school system in terms of closures as well, even though I feel like it's a totally different situation. But I just wanted to throw that out there if people didn't know that update.
Okay. Well, look, we have another meeting on July the 17th, when I think we'll have a lot more information about what is happening at the various institutions. So that'll certainly be at the top of the agenda for that meeting. We've arrived at the end of the agenda. Shall we say that we have received the two reports that have been submitted on the two documents that have been submitted on the safety measures for the coronavirus pandemic? Right.
This is Mike. I would say we want to say that we received them, but I wouldn't mind being, I think we might want to take a second step, which is at least maybe turn these statements into something that is more of a something we put out as a statement rather than just something that we say we received. And so maybe what I could do is work with, if Bill wanted to, but I could work with it and anybody else who wanted to help Barbara or whatever, and maybe we could bring forward a document in this spirit of these two documents. But that would be a statement by us on behalf of faculty at the institutions. And again, I would share this with the unions and the senates too. But do you think that that would be, in addition to receiving these, that we do something where we're going to?
Agreed. Now, do you want to make a statement immediately, or do you want to make it for the next meeting?
If everybody's okay, I'd prefer to do it for the next meeting. I'm kind of swamped until the end of June.
Okay. July 17th is our next meeting. So we will put that on the agenda for a statement to be approved by the FAC. And we'll also have the advantage, you'll have the advantage of a bit more time to work on it. And you also have the advantage of knowing probably what is being said by the various institutions.
Yeah.
Greater detail than we have now.
I think Bill wants to say something.
I'd be glad to, I'd be glad to, I can't do too much, but to look over what's being, to contribute to it, at least this process.
May I?
Can I say one more thing? In whoever said the term bait and switch, that really made my day, because I don't like to go around and accuse people of having bad motives or lying, but I keep feeling like that as the whole student first thing goes forward. But bait and switch is a great way to think of it. Like the FYE course is, you make all these claims, it's very easy to make them, but nobody seriously thinks it's going to do all that. It's not true. It's a bait and switch, We're going to fix everything with this course, and it's just not true. But if you start calling people liars, it changes the nature of the discussion. It kind of puts up everybody's defenses. So I like that term, bait and switch.
I just want to add that I don't think the people are evil. I just think they can't do anything else. If a university wants to survive, they have to do this. And I don't think they're evil. I think they are desperate.
Yeah, no, in this case, certainly, yeah.
If I could just say one more thing. July 17 is a long time from now, and a lot of decisions will be made on campuses between now and then. July 17 will probably be coming late to the game. I think if there's anything that you want to think about immediately, it is to make sure that you don't have differential approaches on campuses with respect to human resources departments, allowing people on one campus to do something, but not allowing people on another campus to do something. And I think there's a potential for that. And I don't know if you can assert that in some way between now and then, but I think actions will be taken in the very near future. And some people will be disadvantaged because HR departments may feel that they have certain roles that perhaps they don't have or shouldn't have.
So Bill, are you suggesting that means we should make a statement now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really feel like July 17th, we're going to be so late to the party that the bar will even be closed. I think if we want to say something, we need to say it now.
We do have an option, which we have the basic principles. We have a statement of principles, which has been distributed in advance, and we have the recommendations that Bill has made. We can make a motion to adopt that right now.
So moved.
So moved.
With the proviso that we will update it as more information arrives. So who's moved that motion?
I tried, Robin.
And Mike Shea seconded.
Okay.
Before you vote, I know I'm not a member of this body, but before you vote, please be sure that you are committed to updating the background that precedes the recommendations.
Yes, I think we should vote the principles and the recommendations, and then the background is just, information to be updated. So I think the motion, I understand the motion as accepting, voting for the principles and the in document 1 and the principal recommendations in document 2.
Is the no, I'm not looking at it at the moment. what you just said about having policies with HR departments, is that included anywhere? And can we just append it?
Yes, you can make that as an amendment. I don't think it's, Bill, is it in the recommendations? I'm looking. So you want to say something like, make sure that there is a consistent policy among different HRs for faculty options. Is something like that the motion?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Well, let's add it in right now.
I think Bill's frozen. Hope that sounds good. Or maybe it's me.
Yeah, I have to save it now as something separate because it won't let me.
Bill, you want to say something?
Well, I would just suggest that that the language could be tightened a little bit so that it doesn't imply that it's up to the HR departments to figure out if they're in line, but rather that there should be a consistent policy given to all HR departments so that they all behave consistently.
Should be a consistent policy. Of course, it might be one we don't like. There's always that problem.
Yeah, this is Lois, and I was just going to say, who would give them that consistent policy?
Well, I guess I would say this, David, or Lois, that we would say that it's a consistent policy and that it follow these principles. I mean, we can't make them do that, but
following the above principles. That a consistent policy, does anything been given, be followed?
A consistent policy.
Be followed.
Let's see, a consistent policy for the application of these principles.
Policy. Hang on a second. Okay, there should be a consistent policy for the application of print that the okay.
To be followed.
Right. I am in need of an English professor here. There should be a consistent policy for the application of these principles to be followed by all HR departments. This is now repeating itself.
Right.
Period. And what should we say? Should or should we say must? I like must myself.
It is now must.
I like must too.
Okay. Here it is, number 5.
May I say one other thing that you don't need to give me attribution for these principles. This is created for use in our system. I'm very happy to cede them to the FAC.
Thank you. And we will invite you to our next meeting as well. So you're not going to get away with just one attendance. Okay. Is there any further discussion? We have modified and added recommendation number 5. You have them all on your screen. So what we are doing is voting to approve the principles. Let's remove the word possible. Well, I would remove it if I could. And we'll just call it principles for assessing, and then we have the recommendations with the modification we just made. Let's do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? I take it as a vote 10-0 in favor. So thank you very much, Bill.
That's great.
Okay, we've reached the end of the agenda. The next meeting of the FAC, as I mentioned, is July 17th and then August 28th. I note that there is no meeting of the Board of Regents after, at least scheduled, after the next meeting, which is next Thursday. That is to say, they are not apparently meeting in July and August, although the Executive Committee is meeting on July the 16th and August 26th. The next scheduled meeting that I see for the Board of Regents is September 17th.
David, can I just make an FYI here? I sent out a link under the chat icon, and I just saw this recently. I sent it to a couple of people. I don't know how many people know of it, but if you go down and click on BU Connecticut, you'll note that the Connecticut State Community Colleges, of which there really is no such thing at this point, has their own website now. And I'm assuming it's not fully developed because there's not a lot there. But what I do find interesting is under the Connecticut State Community Colleges, all the things that the Connecticut State Community Colleges, pardon me for being redundant, are going to provide as support for the students. If you go and click apply to a nearby school, you'll see a map, and all of the community colleges are listed there. But interestingly enough, if you click on one of those, it just identifies the address and a picture. There's no actual link to the college itself. So what I find interesting is the new website of this entity that doesn't exist is telling everybody online all the things that they're going to offer to students, and there's no way to link to one of the individual colleges.
Is this what you found, Paul? This is what I found for Connecticut State Community Colleges under BEYOUCT.com. I have no idea what
Yeah, I provided the link under the chat icon for the meeting today.
Yeah. Apply to a school nearby. So find the school, and there's the map. And so if I click on one, that's what you get. Well, that's interesting.
Can we ask who came up with that stupid BU?
Oh, BUCT, is that what it means?
Is that like be best?
I have no idea. Well, okay, we've come to the end of our agenda. Thanks, Paul, for that additional information. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Francone.
Okay. Those in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned until July 17th, but there's a number of things for us to follow up.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bill, for all your extra work that you put in for bringing us that information on the safety measures. That's really important.
And Colleen, I'll talk to you about the FYE stuff, okay?
Yes, there's follow-up for that. And also for Bill, if you could update the information part as more information comes available. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody.
See ya.
Once time.
Take care. Be well.
Bye.
Oh my